Hi guys, so I'm Kate from Life is Now, and I thought what I do today is just talk a little bit about why we should practice mindfulness. What exactly is it, and why do we need a mindfulness practice in our lives? Mindfulness is certainly a word that is bandied around a fair bit. There's pretty much like mindful everything now, but actually what I often find with my clients is that when you really drill down, very few people really know what exactly is it. So hopefully just over the next few minutes I can give you a little bit of a synopsis, a few thoughts on what I think it is. So there's a lovely saying, John Kabat-Zinn, one of the sort of founding forefathers of mindfulness here, and that is that mindfulness is about being fully awake in our lives. It's about perceiving the exquisite vividness of each moment. And really, by doing that, what it enables us to do is just to get back in touch with ourselves, with who we are in this moment, and actually gaining access to all our resources, all our potential. Generally, our mind tends to do one of two things. It either goes ahead into the future and it says, what if? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if I don't have enough money? What if I get ill? What if something happens to my children? Yada, yada, yada. Or it has a really good habit of going back into the past and it says, but if only. You know, if only that hadn't happened and they hadn't done this, and if only I hadn't made that mistake, and you know, it can go on, regrets essentially. Now, the problem with both of those things, those places where the mind likes to go, is that neither of them are actually real. The past is done, it's happened, we can't change it, it's completely gone, and in fact it only exists in our mind. The future, well, of course that's not here yet. None of us know what the future holds. If we did, we'd all be lottery winners for a start. And of course what the mind's wonderful at doing when it comes to the future is catastrophizing. So it, you know, when it says what if, it will usually come up with a pretty dramatic scenario. Anyone that reads the papers regularly will have a whole load of information and ammunition to prop up those disastrous scenarios that the mind runs with. And of course we don't know any of this stuff. And the reality is that both those past and future dwellings that the mind goes on to are false. They are just existing in our head, and they take us away from being ourselves, our most capable and resource self, right here in this moment. So mindfulness is a practice essentially about reining the mind back in, getting it to come back here and now to this moment where we're actually living our lives. You know, some people talk about it as the eternal now, living moment by moment in the now. And mindfulness is a practice that enables us day by day to just start to watch and observe all the wonderful places that the mind heads off to. And it may well, as you start to get to know your mind, start to get to monitor your mind, it may well go all over the place. That's normal. I encourage my students not to beat themselves up about it when they start to notice, but rather congratulate themselves for finally having noticed where the mind's been heading. I teach this stuff and my mind heads off into all sorts of wonderful places, ridiculous thoughts at times, but it's important to know that we're not responsible for the thoughts that our mind generates. Our mind generates thoughts based on the things that we've seen and experienced in our lives. It's a random thought generator. It's always trying to help us, and sometimes it does. However, a lot of the time it just gets it really wrong. So it's treating ourselves with kindness. The mind coming up with stuff, yeah, great. If it's useful, relevant, helpful, brilliant, do something about it. But actually what we tend to notice as we begin to watch our mind is how much of the stuff it comes up with is of absolutely zero help. So if I were to invite you right now just to cast your mind back perhaps to a point of time in your life when you experienced real joy, some people refer to as happiness, but I think joy perhaps is a better explanation of that, a moment perhaps of satisfaction, contentment, And I would imagine if that moment is coming into your mind right now, that in that moment when you were experiencing that, your mind was not in the past, probably not in the future, but just right there in that moment. And I think if most of us are really honest, what we seek in life is joy, happiness, and yet often we're just barking up the wrong tree. We're looking at, if only these circumstances came true, you know, if only everything worked out, if only I make enough money, if only I get that car, if only my relationship works out, then I will be happy. But of course the reality is we're missing absolutely everything that's here right now, right underneath our nose. And on that note, I think it's really important to say that the present moment is not necessarily great. In fact, sometimes it can really be pretty lousy. That's just life. It is what it is. And we're not necessarily seeking perfection or even happiness in a moment. What we're doing is just acknowledging and bringing ourselves to the truth, essentially, of what is right here and right now. And what is quite surprising is, as we do so, even on perhaps what we might be calling a bad day, or a day when the weather's awful outside, or whatever that is that actually moment by moment we can notice things that can bring us joy, that give us a sense of wonder, that we don't need to define a whole day or a whole hour by circumstances, and actually we can notice something like, you know, a butterfly landing on a flower and suddenly be struck by just the beauty of that, or the laughter on a stranger's face, you know, an animal doing something silly. These are moments, simple moments of joy that are actually here all around us and in almost every moment, and we're missing them. So a mindfulness practice is really about bringing our attention to actually what's here, what's real. So I sometimes use the metaphor, my trainer shared this one with me a few years ago, that the mind could be a little bit like a dog. You imagine taking a dog for a walk. And that dog, if you just allow it to go wherever it wants to go, I'm guessing it's going to lead you into some trouble pretty quickly if you just follow it. It'll lead you, you know, down alleyways, chasing after cats, who knows it. And it's the same with the mind. If we just allow it to take us wherever it chooses to go, you know, autopilot, free running, it most likely will go into the past, if only, or into the future, what if. But of course we have a mind, we're not our mind. Our mind is the thought generator, but we're more than that. So actually, just like when you go for a walk with a dog, we lead the dog in the direction that we want to go. And it's the same with the mind. By beginning to watch and notice where the mind goes, we can then rein it back and then lead it in the direction where we want to live our lives. And that direction always starts with the here and now, because it's all that's real, it's all we know. And it's from this place right now, in this moment, that we have our resources. We have access to all that power. And when I work with, you know, sports professionals, celebrities, whoever it is that actually needs to really tap into their resources, you know, business professionals, that they want to make good decisions, those decisions come from that place of intuition, instinct in this moment. That the moment we start going into thought and problem solving and analysis and everything, we can go a bit off track. So it's not to say there's not value in thinking, there is, but it needs to be done with caution, and actually being very, very aware, using mindfulness, of when the mind goes onto that kind of autopilot route. So really going back to the beginning then, mindfulness is about being fully awake in our lives, that John Kabat-Zinn saying. It's about perceiving the exquisite vividness of each moment. And that's why we practice it. So just as little as 5 minutes a day initially, just sitting there. You don't need to sit like the Buddha in lotus position. You can sit on a normal chair and you can look out the window. You don't even need to have your eyes closed. But just noticing what's here right now in this moment. And every time your mind wanders, which it will, it's normal. And sometimes it might wander for quite a while before you notice that's normal too. But as soon as you notice it, just congratulate yourself for noticing that. And then just very gently, almost like you would with, you know, a dog on a lead or a small child, just guide it back, bring it back to this moment, right back to the here and now. So I hope you find that helpful. Any questions or comments, please leave in the note trail beneath. And if you find this video helpful, please like it, and I'll do my best to share some more.